There it is. Alright, I got it.
We always kind of fuck around at the top anyway when we go live.
All right, let's hit record and on go in 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, everything looks good.
We're looking good, Ryan?
Yes. Oh, no, we're not.
Right
we're not. My recording did not record.
Oh, no.
All right,
you know what?
Are we live on YouTube at least?
We sure are.
Oh,
all right.
sweet.
All right. Well, then, before we begin the show, while my man Ryan figures out once again his technical difficulties, these are the usual shenanigans of this show. Let's talk about what's been going on.
Ryan, do you you can just hit go whenever you can if it'll start.
All right, hang on.
Yeah, Ryan, just hit record whenever. In the meantime, I will play some royalty-free music for 30 seconds while we the free 30 seconds that I can play of a song before we get sued.
These are official friends of the show. Run the Jewels. Am I correct?
That is true. That is absolutely true. Well, hey, my name is Donny Cates. Before we get the show actually rolling and Ryan figures out what's going on, my name is Donny Cates. This is the Stegman and his amazing friends. I am that constant amazing friend. Again, for the millionth time, not real sure why the show is called that, because I am on every episode. But I wanted to go ahead and just give a big shout out to everyone who has joined us for, at least to me, one of the most exciting shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
That we've done in forever. Like, I mean, we've had such amazing guests on in the past. We've had Joe Quesada on. I mean, we had Frank Thierry on. That was fine. I don't know how much that counts, but this is certainly for me quite a big deal. So Ethan, you wanna kind of?
I'm gonna bring us in, but of course I do also have to say right up top, Scott. There's no kind of drip you could throw on. I mean, we got a theme going.
Yeah,
on.
So you don't.
I didn't know. I'm sorry.
I guess that Batman money don't got that drip money.
I know. Yeah. Just saying.
All right. Well, whatever. It's fine. I'll go ahead and bring us in.
If I had. I'm a humble man.
We've already ruined the surprise of who our guest is, because there's no surprise to it. Again, welcome to the Ryan to the Stegman and Friends a podcast. Ryan, say hello.
Hi. Still can't record.
Oh, no, your recording's still not going?
Uh-uh.
Oh no.
Okay. Well, I'll fill up airtime.
Do you need to straight up like restart or anything?
No, that shouldn't be what's wrong. I did that.
Okay.
Hold on, let me see.
Do you need to do a quick time or something?
Let me see if I can.
It's always you. Maybe it's because you record in a fucking basement.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and bring us in, and then introduce you. Say you guys intro, and then Donnie, you can bring Scott in, and then Ryan's audio will cut.
All right.
Okay. So.
All right. We are YouTube live though, so we're
we're all over the place.
Much how you break into comics, you have to be prepared to embarrass yourself in public before things get good.
Very true. Okay, so hey everybody, this is another episode of Stegman and his amazing friends, Ryan Stegman's podcast that he does every week with his main amazing friend that continues to stick around for most all of the episodes. We haven't had another amazing friend on for a good long while, but we don't need one because Donnie, you're all that we need. How are you doing this week, Donnie?
I'm doing great, man. I'm very honored to be doing this podcast right now. I'm so honored that so many people have been reacting to some of our cool teasers and news that we can kind of get into. But mainly, obviously, I if I may tell a very brief story before Scott and I get into it. I in like 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, I was a retailer and ran my own line of comic book shops, and didn't know what I really wanted to be a retailer, like, more than anything else. Like, I would, if my shops hadn't closed down, I'd probably still be doing that to this day, because I was so happy to be doing that. And as a fan, you know, you start reading these books, and then a new writer takes over that you maybe haven't heard of before, and you start reading, you know, you've been reading, you know, Detective Comics since you were a little kid, and then all of a sudden you start reading it, and you go, you flip back to the front cover, and you go, wait, who the fuck is this? You know, and then you start seeing that name, you know, and I unboxed like boxes of Black Mirror, and you know, I remember sitting down in a Barnes and Noble and picking up the first trade of you know, you and Scott and Capullo's you know, absolutely definitive groundbreaking run on Batman, and reading like the first 10 pages and being like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going over the shelves and I'm buying every single one of these. And is absolutely like one of the biggest influencers, like biggest influences on my career. And one of the coolest things about my job is that, like, two of my favorite writers on the planet are Jason Aaron and Scott Snyder, and they are the biggest influences on how I shape and how I look at comics and what comic books should be. And I am so unbelievably fortunate to call both of them friends, and honored beyond belief to have the one and only legend Scott Snyder here in our podcast. So Scott, thank you so much for being here, man.
Oh no, it's a pleasure, brother. Thank you for that intro. I've been hoping to get on here with you guys and get to sing your praises too, man. I really appreciate all the great reads, especially Venom, Absolute Carnage, all of it. Like I'm totally hooked, you know. So I really commend everything you're doing, and I think there's kind of a weird, you know, myth, as you and I joke about a lot, that there's some kind of rivalry between Marvel or DC or between creators at the companies. And the funny thing is, like, not only do we talk as friends all the time, but I feel like I've told you stuff coming up in my stuff, and sometimes you tell me stories, and the whole fun is knowing how good the material is, you know,
right.
The aisle, and you're going to read something that inspires you. So you guys are certainly kicking ass right now. So it's a pleasure to get to.
I've often said that between you and Capullo and between me and Stegman, that there's a strong case for there being the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Modern Age, and the Metal Age. You know, like we, I think that you and I have a very healthy competition. But like you and I were talking about it earlier on the phone before we started talking, is that, like, I think that there is this thing that fans think that, like, oh, you know, Scott Snyder and Donny Cates must, like, you know, like, hate the fact that, like, oh, you know, this, his book outsold that book for that month, or this, and, you know, everything. And, like, Scott, I don't give a shit. Like, we just really enjoy each other's work, and, like, continue to be inspired by it. Like, I definitely see things in your work that, like, I've always said that, like, you and Jason Aaron are the two guys that, like, I see things in your books that I say, that's exactly how I would have pulled that off. Like,
right back at you, man. And Jason, for me, was the biggest influence coming in too, because he's like a few years before I broke in, you know. So Scalped was kind of the stuff they gave me when I was working for Vertigo, and his Ghost Rider and all that stuff that he was doing real early on. And so,
how good is that Ghost Rider run?
Oh my God, I have the whole omnibus.
Dude,
like right here. Yeah.
Can I ask you something? Because that's really interesting. That Ghost Rider run for me was so informative about taking a character that didn't have much of a backstory and being able to go in there and like flesh it out. And I see you do that with like Court of Owls and
you with Venom. Same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally got that from Jason Aaron's Ghost Rider run.
Yeah.
Of like being able to add, this idea of being an additive writer.
Additive. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the thing. And the other thing that I love about Jason, what I love about your writing and the people that I gravitate towards the most as writers, like Lemire and then, you know, James Tynan coming up after me and all that stuff.
Absolutely.
I love when people can write across like multiple platforms and multiple genres, where you do like, you're capable of doing a giant event like Absolute Carnage, you know, all of that, and then you can also do God Country, and I still know it's the priorities of the storytelling. The same thing with Jason. Like, I can read The Goddamned, and I can read Thor, or I can read, you know, same thing with Lemire. Like, Lemire, I can read Sentient, like some small book he's doing over here, and then read, you know, his Animal Man or any of it, and you're like, that's Jeff Lemire. And that I think part of it is like being able to write from a place where you're trying to add to the character's mythology, you're trying to come in and do something fun, you're trying to invite people in, and then you're trying to say something personal, you know? It's all
I think that you and I both get sometimes a lot of flack. Not a lot of flack, but like when you come onto a run and, you know, the word retcon is thrown around, I think, incorrectly a lot. It's just finding little pieces where stories haven't been told. You know, it's not saying this thing didn't happen. Like, it's, you know, like our Venom run, you know, we didn't retcon the origins of the symbiote. We just told you a new piece of things. And that's the same thing as like Court of Owls. Like, you didn't erase anything that came before. Which I really quick, just as an aside, we should probably talk about what we're doing here, because I have so much to ask you. Because I'm not gonna bore you with any of the how'd you break into comics bullshit, because you and I both get that question a billion times and it's Googleable. So if you want to know how Scott broke into comics, you can go and look it up. But I want to know about process. I want to know about geeky writer stuff. So, but before I say that, I wanted to say that we're actually doing something cool that has actually never kind of been done. As you and I are talking, and of course Ryan's gonna chime in, and Ethan's gonna chime in and stuff. But Ryan is gonna be doing a live drawing as we're talking of a character that you and the infamous Mr. Capullo created, the Batman Who Laughs. And it's a character that Ryan Stegman has never drawn before, so it's an original, 100% original. And at the end of the show, or whenever the piece is finished, we are going to mail that finished piece around. And it'll be signed by not only Ryan and myself, but by you, Scott, and by Mr. Greg Capullo himself. And we're going to put it up online and auction it off for charity. So it's a 100% like one of a kind piece of art, you know, drawn by an artist who has never drawn that character. And I don't think that there exists a piece of anything that the four of us have ever signed.
Yeah, probably not.
Until we do Marvel versus DC, and then I'm sure we'll be doing a lot of them.
Yeah, right?
But Scott, really quick, I wanted to ask you because, excuse me, Ryan and I, when we first got together, we were kind of paired up in a way that I've heard you tell stories that is kind of similar, where. And I'm not saying anything that Ryan hasn't heard before. When I got the job of Venom, I'm such a Venom like nut job, and just had such passion for the character. And like what you're reading now, going into this big event that we're about to launch, that we're kind of teasing and stuff. This was all like planned out for like 5 years. But I didn't have an artist partner. It was all just like a Bible that I had written, right? And then Marvel came to me and said like, hey, Stegman, I think, is the guy. And I remember telling them no, like I don't want Stegman on the book.
You said that you hated me.
Because I hated you. Yeah, no, not because of that. Because Stegman had just come off of like Venom Inc. and a bunch of Spider-Man stuff, and I wanted someone who was like as new to me to the pantheon. I wanted someone who was, fresh. And then I got on a phone call with Ryan Stegman. Like Devin Lewis, our editor, was like, "Will you just call it and just see how you get along, and like tell him your story?" And that, what was supposed to be a 20-minute phone call, turned into a 4-hour conversation that has now led to Ryan Stegman being legitimately my best friend on the planet. And I feel like your story is so kind of similar, but from a different kind of angle. And I want to know, I guess the question I'm asking is, you're doing a huge book right now that I definitely want you to talk about.
Sure.
But when you first started talking with Capullo, how much of what you're doing now was in the plan?
Oh, Death Metal? I mean, Death Metal has been there since we pitched Metal. So that was there 2016. So it's the same kind of thing where it's about a 4-year plan. But I mean, honestly, the landscape at DC, it's different. I feel like I always kind of said, and maybe I'm talking way out of school, so apologies if I'm like, not being diplomatic the way I normally should, but it's late in terms of I've been up for like a long time with this baby, and I'm ready for a weekend.
We're all friends here.
I always felt like, my time at DC was more like the Wild West a bit, where it was like, you didn't know if like because it was so volatile in terms of like, it changed so rapidly in terms of initiatives and things we were doing, and there was a much more kind of impulsive kind of feel to the whole landscape. And when I had the opportunity to go to Marvel or DC, I remember being like, DC's like the Wild West, where like you could find gold in the hills, or you could get like shot on Main Street. And
because you did do some Marvel work, and I feel like that, like I remember
the opportunity to go to either one. Actually, I don't know if I've ever talked about that, but it was like a real fork in the road. And DC, they were much more, they were like, well, do you want to do Detective Comics backups? And that's all I was ever supposed to do at that point. But that was enough to be like, yes, I will go to DC if I can write Batman and stuff, even if it's just 6 pages.
Can I tell you something funny that happened, just that you probably never knew? When you were doing American Vampire, I was reading that, and I was about to do Scarlet Spider, and we didn't have a writer yet. And I was like, we should get the Scott Snyder guy. And they were like, no, I don't think so. And then like 2 weeks later, it was like, Scott Snyder's writing Batman. I was like, oh, okay.
They actually, what they had me doing was they were talking to me, and I would have loved to do it because I love the series, but about doing the Scotty Young.
Oh, really?
The second part of that. And then doing, I was talking to Janine back when Janine was there, Schaefer. Right. About doing like a Shield thing before Hickman did all that stuff too. So it was like, I mean, I would have been happy either way, but it was more like DC was the place where I was kind of like, I'm gonna go to the frontier and stake my claim and maybe die. Or Marvel felt more organized and more like there was more of a system and more of a kind of more oversight in a good way and in a bad way at that time. You're talking like 2008, 2009, 2010.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
when
when
I
I got
was
into
running my
DC,
comic book shop. Yeah.
yeah, and when I got into DC, it was that way. It was like I got on. They gave me the backups in Detective, and so I started writing the Black Mirror, but it was all Gordon and it was all James Jr. And then Paul Dini, who was doing the features, just happened to leave, and they were like, "Do you want the whole thing?" And I was just terrified.
Right.
I was like, "Yeah, sure," And
Yeah.
then I had to argue with them at that time too, where it was DC was that kind of place where you could be like, they would make these weird. It was just always kind of like a. It was always kind of like you never knew. You just kind of rolled the dice. So I remember Mark Bagley was on the book, and I love Mark Bagley, but I was like, that wasn't the right thing, for that. And so I remember being like, I'm a nobody, and I'm gonna ask if I can work with Jock instead of Mark Bagley. And it was Mike Martz who was kind of like, if you can get Jock, who's never going to work with you, to do that book with you, and you don't know him, I didn't know him, then I'll let you do it. And so I went to San Diego that year on my own dime, and my whole goal was to meet Jock and convince him to do that story with me. And so he was really nice. He was like, I'll meet with you.
Jock's also maybe one of the nicest human beings who's ever walked the face
here. He does not have
a
bone in his body, unless you get. If you start talking football like soccer with him in a way that's aggressive, that's the only weird.
I've never had the pleasure.
I'm telling you, it's like this weird button you push, and he's just like, "Don't you fucking," and you're like, "Whoa!" It's pretty amazing. But so I went to San Diego and I met him in this bar, and I remember Mike Martz had been like, "You're never gonna get him, but go ahead, do your best." And so I was like, Jock, I know you're a big star, and I'm nobody, and da-da-da, but, this is the story. And I pitched it, and I was so afraid of not... we were drinking in this bar, and he's a much bigger dude than me, and he's, like, an Englishman, and I was trying to keep up with him, and I couldn't. And I was like, if I'm not even, having a couple drinks, he's going to think I'm a total... how am I going to write Batman with him, whatever? And so I was just, by the end, I was so nervous, and I hadn't eaten, I was, just a mess. But I'm like... And that's when James Jr. this. And he was like, you know what, Squall? He was like, I like it. Let's do it. And I remember going back to my hotel room and typing an email to Mike Martz and being like, guess what, Martz? You know what I mean?
That
was
awesome.
Jock is in. And I literally fell asleep with my hand on the N, where I was like, like that. And anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that coming over to DC at that time, it really was almost like I thought there'd be opportunity, but the opportunity that was afforded me so beyond anything that I thought, that I spent my first 3 or 4 years there terrified all the time, like anxiety, terrified, telling my wife, I don't think I can do this, terrified, all of that. I didn't be on Batman.
You're describing me right now.
Well, imagine that's but you have some stuff under your belt before you're on a character you love. You've done great work already and that stuff too. But I know you've had a rocket ship ride, and I know you and I talk about this and the pressures of it times. But same thing here, where it was I didn't want to have Batman until I had years under my belt, if I ever got, of practice, because I didn't want to fuck it up and go on there and be like, I'm on my favorite character. But I had that before I had done any other DC comics, so I was convinced I was fucking it up from day one. So I was a nightmare.
Well, I was
of anxiety,
dude, I'm still in the middle of it. I mean, I've only been. I remember there was a New York Comic Con where I took you aside and I was kind of free. Do you remember this?
I do, but I remember San Diego where I had a bad time last time where I'm yelling and upset and all this. We still go through it. You know what I mean?
I mean, you do what you got to do. You got to do the work, But you're one of the only guys that I struggle to say this because I would never want to ever people to think that I'm comparing myself to you because I have so much to learn still from you, and I still continually learn from reading your books. But that public perception, at the very least, of being an overnight success, of being a, because like I am a 10-year overnight success. Like I was doing a bunch of image books and indie books, but it wasn't until I got to Marvel where the rocket ship, and I've only been at Marvel for 3 going on 4 years now, and it's just been insane. And so like, you're the guy that I took aside at New York, and I was like, dude, how do you handle this? I
told you, I was like, I completely fucked up the first few years, meaning like I see you handling it a lot better than I did. I mean, for me, you're similar to me. Like the work, you never see it in the work in terms of like, if I have anxiety or I'm having panic attacks about it all the time.
Yeah.
My personal life suffers, my marriage suffers, all of that, which was the first few years on Batman where I really put my family a lot. But I was daring bosses to fire me. I mean, I'll tell you, this is like the story that I think I told you this then, but with the work, I can sit there and do it and be just, it almost makes me more intense about being like, I'm going to make the best thing I've ever made, but I'm so terrified of it not being as good as I hope it is and everybody hating it that I'm going to almost like blow my life up, even though I'm putting everything in there.
Exactly.
So I remember like it was right around the time Court of Owls was finishing or whatever, and I was just like, so, because again, I didn't even want to do Batman #1, any of that stuff. Like I was just happy hiding under Grant's shadow. And all of that, and by that time, I remember I went to New York Comic Con, and I went to the DC party. They had like a DC company party, and I went there and I started arguing with Dan DiDio about schedule stuff and all of this. It was mostly, again, it was one of those self-destructive things where you're basically asking to get fired because the pressure is so much, and you don't realize it later on. As you get wiser, you're like, I was totally asking for it. And I was just like, man, you never do what you say you're going to do, and blah, 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 and blah, 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 like this, And he's the boss, and a lot of people were watching this, and, I wasn't really aware of it. And my wife kind of was like, look, just stop. It's a party. Let's just go. I'm like, fine, whatever. And then I left, and I went straight from there to the Marvel one, just as a kind of fuck you to DC, because I was so angry. And I went to the Marvel party, and by the time I got to the Marvel party, which you guys know is only, 10, 15 blocks away.
Yeah, right.
Everybody at that party knew that I had gone into a fight with Dan DiDio and was asking me about it. And I remember just they were like, did you get into a physical fight with da-da-da? And I remember it was Tom, like, not to call him out, but like Tom Brevoort actually is one of the people that the next day, got in touch and was kind of like with a bunch of friends and was like, you gotta just get yourself under control, I wasn't that, I was always like with fans and with friends and with, I'm never that guy, like, but with bosses, and that, so, it gets to you, man,
You and I have such a similar path because I had a really fucking bad time. I think it's pretty public knowledge that I was like right at the height of like my Marvel stuff happening and everything. I went through a divorce, and I was kind of, I had dedicated so much to myself to wanting to be the best and like wanting to be, all these things that I had kind of let the life shit fall apart, and I remember like Joe Quesada taking me aside at that same New York Comic Con and taking me aside and saying like, hey man, you look like shit, like you've lost weight, like are you okay, like can you do this? And me being very honest with him and being like, this is all I can do. You know,
Yeah.
like doing the work is what is saving me right now. You know,
Yeah.
and then I had to go on stage at like the big, not Hall H, but like the big, you've been on those
Yeah.
stages,
Yeah.
the big,
Yeah. I know
the
that.
big, the big Marvel or DC where there's hundreds of people there, and I was scared shitless because I had just had this kind of like massive panic attack at when Joe Quesada, like your childhood like hero, takes you aside and is just like, hey, can you do this job? It's so scary, and me telling him like, Joe, right now, honestly, all I can do is this job, and like I'm good, dude. Like I'm good. But then I was so shaken by it that I remembered. It's so funny that you bring up Tom Brevoort because we were all waiting in the wings to go out. It was me and Hickman and Jason and Dan Slott and everybody. And we were about to go out, and I was about to be announced on, God, I think it might have been Thor or.
I think it might have been Venom.
It might have been Venom. It was going to be a big announcement for me, but I was in like no mental shape to be in front of a crowd. And Tom Brevoort just very, very, very like quietly leaned over to me and put a hand on my shoulder, and he said, "You're gonna be okay, son. I'm like, everything's gonna be okay, son." And it gave me the confidence to go out there and be, I always describe it, and Scott, I'm sure you can relate, that there's capital D, capital C, Donny Cates, who's at cons, and then there's just Donny, who's at home, and like sometimes it's a struggle to go and do that, and like, it's such a blessing, this job that we have. And like, I used to see pictures of you that you would put on Twitter where you would leave panels and people would just mob you for like signings and stuff. And I remember thinking, like, as a young upstart who had just started doing Thanos and stuff, and thinking like, God, like that's what I want. Like I want that so bad. Like I want people to love my work, and for my work to bring them the happiness that Scott does, because I've always, and I've told Ryan this too. I to go on a brief tangent. A guy on Tumblr asked me, "Hey man, like during this pandemic, is it harder to write? Like how are you dealing with it?" And my response was, I consider my job to be, I'm the guy who digs escape tunnels away from the bad world. And so, is it harder? Yes, but only because I'm digging as fast as I can, for you guys. And it's such a privilege that we have this job. It's such a blessing that we have these things, but that eventually did come true. Like Ryan Stegman and I can't leave a panel room without there being 40, 50 people out there wanting the time, and you have to give it to them, because like that's why you have your job.
Well, that's why you go to a convention.
I mean, that's the love, I love
that. I mean, I love going to cons and getting to meet the people that actually pick up the books and say thank you to them. I think the thing that is paralyzing sometimes that I see with you too is just the pressure of knowing how much these characters mean to people, and then knowing that so many people are reading your take on them, where you're trying to put something personal in, and the only way to make something personal a lot of the time with a character that's as old as Spider-Man, Venom, Batman, is to just make it personal. That's when I teach, for stuff. That's the thing I'm proudest of, is trying to explain to new writers the only way you're going to tell an original story is to make it something that's about your hopes, your fears, doing it in a way that speaks to you. Your voice is
so funny. It's so funny, Scott, that like I think that I'm still learning like how to I'm still fucking up. I'm still getting into fights on Twitter and being a fucking jackass because I'm a 35-year-old fucking hothead and I'm trying to get better about it, but like this constant thing, like there's one constant criticism of like my Venom run is that people say that like all it is a self-insert and that like Donnie's just writing about his own life and like writing about his own thing, and I'm like, why would that be that's my job, like that's like I'm writing about real things, I'm writing about real pain. Like when I was going through my divorce, Venom was the book that I talked about it because Eddie and the symbiote had been separated, and I needed that outlet, and I think that, and I think maybe I don't know, Scott, you might disagree with me on this one, but like as long as you're staying true to the character and the character is making the choices that you wouldn't want to write a Spider-Man story where he picks up a machine gun and goes into New York Times, starts fucking shooting everybody because you're mad, about some shit. You don't want to do something like that, but like as long as you're true to the character, like I think the best books ever made in this industry are books where the writing shows that it's coming from a real place, a real emotion. There's a bit of a meme, and I don't mean to poke fun of you, Scott. But I don't mean to poke fun of you, but as an avid reader of your Batman, mythos, I think it's no surprise to you that sometimes you get poked at about the when I was a boy. Yeah. When my father told me these things, right? Yeah. But like I've heard people say that shit about you, and I'm like, yeah, but the Batman story, like the DNA of the Batman story is when I was a boy.
Yeah.
Like the story starts like the first Batman story ever written. The DNA is when I was a boy,
Yeah. I mean, I love going back to that. The first person that ever really called me out on that, it was like 2 years into my career, was David Brothers, and I remember he wrote a piece that was like look at this stylistic tick, and I saw it. Somebody sent it to me, and honestly, the first thing I did was write him and say thank you for writing that piece because it made me aware of it, and he wound up being my editor on Witches. So I mean, for me, I love that kind of, those kinds of things. Too.
And you know what? Actually, you once sent me a tweet. And I think you were joking. I like to think that you were joking, but you had read something of mine, and you made some sort of a joke of "Careful, kid, you're starting to repeat yourself."
Did I?
And I don't remember what it was in referral to. But it is always stuck with me of like, hey, careful, because like Scott as well as I do that like there's a way to write a comic book by paint by numbers. There's a way to there's a way to lay out all your double page splashes, all your double page reveals, and then end on your page 20 and just crank a thing out. Like, you write enough of these things, you can do it with your eyes closed. But like, I think that if I were to ask you this question and Jason Aaron this question, and the guys that like you and I both admire, I always, and Ryan Stegman can attest to this. I am constantly saying, to the editors when we're having summit meetings, and to Ryan, like, okay, yeah, that's a really clean way to get to that point, but let's just for a second think about what's the hardest way to tell that story. Like, what's the most complicated way to tell that story? What's the most surprising way and the most unique way to tell that story? We all know the story of Spider-Man fighting Doc Ock and then he goes to jail, right? I can knock that out in 20 minutes and put it out there, and that'd be fun. But, like, let's all just, like, take a break and, like, take a breath and say, all right, we have it, but let's challenge ourselves and say, yeah, it's good, but is it perfect? Is it great? And at this point, I think it's actually a really good segue, because, Scott, I really, really desperately want to talk to you about your newest project.
Yeah, sure.
If you don't mind, if you don't.
Your coffee. Hang on one second. It's right here. It's like,
Okay.
I can still hear you.
All right. Well, then, while Scott's away, I just want to say, obviously a huge fan, and I've been following, Scott's career for so long, and but as the kind of shitty thing that no one tells you when you start reading comics is that people will send you massive amounts of free comics, and you will never have any time to read them. And so, like, I called Scott earlier this week, and I just admitted to him, and I was like, hey man, I'm sorry, I haven't read it yet. And he was like, hey man, it's no big deal, and like, I'm friends with so many people in comics that I'm best friends with that I haven't read most of their work, but they're good people. But I read it twice over the past 2 days, and Dark Metal. If I could describe it, I want you to talk about it more, because
Sure.
I want you to hype it up and tell people kind of what it is, because, like, it's so incredibly over the top, but so also heartfelt, that I told Ryan today, and I mean this in a compliment way. And so, Scott, please take this as it's intended, that Dark Metal #1 feels like issue 6 of a 30-issue arc.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you're just dropped into the middle of this thing, and it's so shocking, and it immediately sweeps the feet under your ground, or the ground under your feet, that in a great way, but you're never lost, like you have these touchstones. And I wanted to ask you something. You and I both started, I want to be really clear about this, that, like, I think it's just like a writing tick that you and I both have, and it is something that works really efficiently, that I just noticed that, Scott, you're not going to offend me if the answer to this is no. Have you read Absolute Carnage?
I read Absolute Carnage, yeah.
So the first page of Absolute Carnage is a 9-panel grid of Eddie looking right down the barrel of the camera and saying, hey, this is about to be really fucking bad. Like, I'm not gonna bullshit you. Like, this is gonna be horrible. And then I open up.
It's true.
I open up Dark Metal, and it's Sergeant Rock, like, looking right down the barrel of the camera and saying, like, hey, I'm not gonna bullshit you, kid. And I'm not. I hope you don't take that as me, like, accusing you of anything, but I think it just speaks to, you know, you've influenced me, I've influenced you, like, that kind of thing. Because when you're writing on that sort of massive scale, you do kind of have to, like, open that page up with, like, a, hey, this is what's happening, like, this is going to be insane. So with that said, Scott, will you, since, you know, the show that you're on right now kind of has started life as a more Marvel centric, you know, like Venom Boys kind of a thing. Please tell us, like, what is Dark Metal? What is metal? What the fuck are you and Capullo doing? Because good lord, that first issue is a banger. So just
thanks, man. Yeah, and it's funny because I remember reading Absolute Carnage, and one of the things that we had, I mean, that Sergeant Rock opening, the funny thing about it was the thing that I told Greg and them about back in 2017 when I was like, listen, this is a war story, and I can tell you what, we're going to open with zombie Sergeant Rock. And the joke is, he's talking to you at the beginning, being like, everything's going to be okay, and on the last page you realize Batman has him with a Black Lantern ring, and da-da-da. So I remember seeing Absolute Carnage, and then it was the calculus of, like, calling James and being like, if I do this but do it in a different way, is it going to seem too similar or whatever it is at that point?
Really?
Yeah, seriously, you can go, like, text him right now before I can even, like, whatever.
Well, so no, that's such a no. I honestly take that as a compliment. Honestly.
Yeah, that's pretty. I think that's pretty cool to hear.
I feel like you and I have very similar priorities, right?
Yes, I do.
I think there's multiple kinds of calculus that you do when you're doing an event or you're working corporate, right? So when I do my own stuff, the same way when you do your own stuff, the math is really just about convincing people that the world you're creating, the characters you're creating, you know, are worth spending time with. But they already care about Batman, Superman, all of that stuff, and they have an investment in all kinds of opinions about corporate comics, about DC, about Marvel. They might hate Marvel, they might hate DC, all of it. So you're dealing with, like, three legs of a stool almost, where you're like, one is, how do fans feel about events right now? How are they doing? Like, what is the money situation in the world? You're asking them to buy into something big. How are they doing? And you think about them, and there's that. Then there's the calculus of, like, your company and the characters and how they've been perceived over the last couple of years. Like, so for Death Metal, it's almost like the criticisms of DC, like, as stuff has been really strong in different areas, it's also been really disconnected, siloed. Doomsday Clock, you know, which was great, didn't sort of affect the line because of different, you know, structural, just because of scheduling stuff, all that kind of stuff, the way that people, and we all would have hoped in certain ways, just because of, you know, timing and the way things hooked up. All of that kind of stuff you take into consideration. And then the third leg of the stool is just, how do you tell us, which is the most important, how do you tell a story that matters to you about the state of comics right now and what you think this company and these characters mean? Because if you're doing a big event, right? So the thing that I think that you and I see similarly, and the reason why maybe we came to kind of a similar place to open up something that's an event, is because this last couple years are just a fucking mess, right? Where people are scared, they're angry, they're broke, they're fucking exhausted. Comics has been a shit show in many ways, all over the place. Like, as much as we're proud of so many things, it's also been like store closures and, you know, worries about distribution, all kinds of stuff. So when you have a character stare at the screen and say, like, the reason that I did that with Sergeant Rock and the reason I pitched it that way was that that's a love letter to the retailers and the fans, where it's not just going to be bad out there. It's telling retailers and them, I am sorry that everything has been so crazy in the world and for you, and it's been hard. He's talking to them, and I have to read the issue to retailers before it came out. And I remember just saying, like, this page is for, this is for you guys saying, thank you for what you do. You are the people that show up even when everything is shitty. And, you show up anyway out of love. You're the soldiers that don't go away. And that's Sergeant Rock saying to you, we're going to go have some fun. We're going to play together, or we're going to beat this together.
I hadn't even thought of it like that. That's fucking awesome, man. We just did that.
But you do think of it that way, because the way that I see it with you, you might not deliberately do it. Like I'm just very calculated about it too, just to try and I'm neurotic, and I kick it the tires a million times about the best way to convey it. But what you're doing with Absolute Carnage is you're drawing me in by saying on that first page, listen, like, this event is going to be something that I'm going to approach stylistically in a different way, and I'm telling you, I know you're expecting something to start a certain way, but I'm going to do it differently. And that grabs me and says, Donnie's going to do this in a way that, fits his style, that's going to be about the characters in his own way. And that's Capullo and I try and do that too, the way you and Ryan do, where it's like, I want you to feel like you're getting something from us that's personal, that's mainlined from our, kind of creative matrix to you, just being like,
right.
We won't get this from someone else, and we're not going to give you the same paint by number shit.
And
that's the way I feel like you do.
I think that something really quick, like a long time ago, one of my editors kind of called me out in a very nice way, and said that it was Nick Lowe. I'll give him credit. He's a great editor who I love. Nick Lowe. He said, there's something about your writing that I couldn't pin down for a long time, but it just occurred to me, is that you take time to show our heroes being scared and like reacting to things, because like, when you're writing, like it's these characters are such archetypal, like mythological characters, and they're such stand-ins for our audience. And seeing someone like Eddie Brock or Spider-Man, like, or Doctor Strange or Batman, look up at something and be terrified of it is like really important, Really quick, if I could just say something, and this is gonna kind of derail us a little bit, but Scott, I just wanted to address this really quick because it's coming up in our chat really quick.
Sure.
A lot of people in the chat are saying that I seem like this is gonna derail us so much, but I want to get back on track and let Scott please tell us more about his amazing book. That there's like a lot of comments saying that I'm hammered, and that I'm
no, that's
either
me.
high or anything. I'm almost 7 years sober.
The comments were coming, I think, because you were smoking and the room is so smoky. I think that's.
It's just I mean, I smoke cigarettes, and I probably should. Yeah. And I'm just having a conversation with my friends, but like,
I think that's all it was.
I'm almost 7 years sober, and I'm really proud of that. And like, I kind of don't really like, I kind of really don't appreciate that. Like, if it seems like I'm like rambling or nervous, it's just because I'm having fun talking like story stuff with my friend Scott Snyder. So like, I want to dispel that rumor like really quick. Like it's just, it bothers me because it's getting sober fucking sucks. And if you would like to read a book about me getting sober, it is called Buzzkill, available from Image Comics. That was produced.
And don't just tunnel vision it. Don't let that, like, that's if people are trolling you or whatever. Don't let it.
Yeah, I'm just it just bugs me because I want to sit here and have like a great conversation about writing.
We are, dude. Don't telling you,
but,
like that. But there are people out there that are going to try and get under your skin no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what, and that kind of harkens back to something that you had talked about making making mistakes as you were coming up, because like
Yeah.
you and I have both had what other people have described as meteoric careers, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
And look, you know, speaking for myself, I'm just a human being and I make mistakes, you know, and I've said some shit on Twitter that I regret. You know, I've definitely, lashed out, but like I'm just learning, you know, as it goes by, and hopefully getting better at it. And so, speaking about getting better at it, I got to tell you, I I don't think that Greg Capullo has ever drawn anything better in his fucking life.
Oh, he's
than
on fire, dude.
that
Yeah,
first, than that first issue of Death Metal.
well, I mean, that's the thing about Greg that I love, and the reason. I mean, just to go back to what you were saying about you and Ryan, and the thought that I wanted to finish before that I forgot. I kind of went off the rails myself. It wasn't anything with you, but it was more that the thing that you need, I think, in this whole thing, is a partner who brings out the best in you and sees even at your worst in some way you care about delivering something personal. So for me, the key to doing Batman with Greg was always, and I'll like to rewind, when I met Greg, or when we were put together too, we hated each other. Like he came from a school. He sent me, as a kind of like, this is how I like to work, a script for Haunt that he had done with Kirkman. And the script was 5 pages long or 7 pages long for like.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And I was so neurotic and terrified of having been on Detective and being on Batman at that time that everything was not only like full script, but like maniacal full script with multiple references. And weirdly, like Raphael on American Vampire and Jock and Francesco enjoyed working full script and then kind of changing things up. So I hadn't even realized there was a kind of problem with sort of approaching somebody saying, this is how I work and that. And so with Greg, he called me and he's like, he wrote me and he's like, I've been writing this email. I've been trying to figure out how to write this email for 5 minutes and your script is still printing out. I'm running out of paper. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, and he was like, just give me, you got to give me the important stuff and the important dialogue. And I was like, it's all important, Mr. Capullo. I was like being all formal and whatever. And what happened was the same thing. We got on the phone, talked story. I realized, he did some sketches and it was amazing. But for a long time, actually, for the first 4 or 5 months that we worked together, I still wouldn't get off full script. And he was always pushing back and saying, I would give you better work if you let me loosen up. And it was that issue 5 of Court of Owls where it turns around, where I finally was like, you know what, like, whatever idea you have for this, like, I'm just going to write the dialogue. Why not? And part of it was just being so stressed out. And he made up that idea that the book would turn. And we got, it was sort of a seminal moment in our run. And I remember just realizing how dumb I had been. And then from that point forward, our friendship not only kind of blossomed, but I realized, like, I can learn from this guy. And so he's been my big brother in terms of showing me how to be a better person, a better writer, all of that, and his life is I keep telling him, I'm like, write a book, man. And he plays around with the idea, but I want him to write a book about drawing, like a tutorial, like on writing, like the Stephen King book.
Right. Which is a, by the way, Bible for me. Right?
Me too. Yeah. I mean, like that, exactly. Like, I want him to write something that shows what drawing has meant for him in his life and his approach to it, and why he sort of does it the way he does it, and what his story is, and because all of it together, when you know all of it, is just so inspiring on every level. Where you're just like, this guy, the whole idea that he's already a superstar when he comes into Batman, and the thing about him, that the biggest lesson I can take from Greg, like the biggest thing that I would walk away from, other than just being a better person, is that he always is hungry. So just like you said with Death Metal, the goal was to come in and say, when I pitched Metal 1, there was a lot of resistance internally at DC because there was a feeling that we needed to sort of do the kind of, more of a Jeff Johns kind of cosmic, reverent event that was dark, or the kind of thing
right.
To a moment. And I was like, I just want to do something that reminds people that these things are supposed to be crazy fun and lunatic,
Exactly. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And I went back to like Infinity Gauntlet, and Secret Invasion, and like just all of that stuff, Odyssey, all of it, and just like.
Donnie and I obviously agree with you on that.
What?
I said Donnie and I obviously agree with you on that. That they should be big and fun and crazy.
I have to pee so bad.
Yeah, go.
But I wanna ask you a question to fill time. Not to fill time, because I actually want to hear this answer, because I'll actually be able to hear you guys when I'm going and peeing. You won't be able to hear me peeing, but
do you want to ask him when you get back? Because I also have a question.
Reading that first issue of Death Metal, seeing you seamlessly tie together like the things that you have done on Batman and the things that Jeff Johns has done on his Watchmen stuff, and all the Justice League stuff, and making it all cohesive. Like, it seems like honestly, like, I read it, and like in the nicest way possible, I looked at it and I was like, motherfucker, I would never want that job to try and and you did it perfectly. Like, I understood it all perfectly, like I could have walked into that book as a new reader and understood that, but like Ryan and I have it pretty easy because, Ryan and I's big event has been seeded for like 2 years now, or 3 years now, of, the God of Symbiotes, Null, is coming. And now, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that Null's going to arrive on Earth, But like, you are dealing with such multiversal, and also adding in the Watchmen parts of things, and like the beginning of which, by the way, I love your AC/DC joke when the Batman Who Laughs like arrives in their private conversation. But like, taking all of that and like harnessing all of that, like, I'm gonna leave to go pee when you answer this, but how much of that was you and you wanting to make all that? Because really, what it reminded me of a lot, and you actually touch on it in that big spread of seeing Hal Jordan as Parallax.
Yeah.
Like, you actually touch on Jeff Johns' kind of like explanation of why he became Parallax, as it being, touched upon by the anti-crisis kind of, thing, right? Like, I want to know how much of that is you wanting to serve your own story, and how much of that is you wanting to serve DC as an entity, and being the leader that you are as Scott Snyder, the top writer at DC, and like wanting to serve DC and like try to make everything cohesive and like make it important, and how much of that is combined with, I also want to tell this story of Bruce.
I totally understand what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, I think for me with that, the math is essentially, I've gotten to do everything I wanted with Batman. I've gotten to do a lot with Superman, Swamp Thing, multiple characters. And I've been at DC 10 plus years at this point, and I've done some creator owns, both there and elsewhere. Like, we've done Witches and AD and stuff outside. But not nearly as much as I thought I would do when I came into comics. So I'm just like being completely raw and honest about it. I always thought that I would do some DC comics and some mostly creator owned. And I always saw Jeff and people like Jeff and Brian Bendis as the kind of shepherds of these, you know, massive mythologies, and I would be more of somebody who did like the Black Mirror and then kind of went out and did my own stuff. And what happened when I was like pushed onto Batman, not in a way that I didn't want it, but it was more like I didn't know it was going to be #1. I didn't know it was going to be Greg Capullo. I thought it would be an extension. I didn't know Grant was going to be kind of off on Batman Inc. I thought it was going to be something where I'd still be kind of, you know, the indie Batman, not the big Batman. But once that happened and you kind of adjust to those priorities and you take on that mantle and you say, all right, you know what, if I'm going to do it, then I have to do the work and think about the history of this character and where he is in terms of what people think of him, how I'm going to make him my own, and write about things that are personal and all of that. And then when you get to event level stuff now, for me, it's the same kind of math. So the way that I approach something like death metal is, it's an event, so it needs to be about what we think our heroes and our company, like our line, stands for right now. And the thing that I pitched back in 2016, 2017, that I feel even more strongly about now is that, you know, sometimes we feel that comics need to be, like, everything needs to be kind of blown up and started over constantly in ways that I think try and attract a new audience that is growing and is there and is young, but doesn't necessarily always respond to the idea that we're just starting it over, so come on in, you know? And then there's also the audience that feels that everything should be almost, you know, devoted to a singular continuity that goes back to a certain time, and that you know, it's cumulative and all of that. And all of that's important too. Like, both things are valid and valid approaches. But the thing that has worked best for me and Greg on Batman, and the thing that I believe, is that we need to do both. You know, you need to take some measured risk and to try and push things forward. But also you have to also acknowledge the generational aspect of comics and the dedication that these fans have, you know, over years and years and years of reading. And there's things embracing all of it.
That's also what you're doing, which I love so much about what I loved and appreciated so much about dark metal.
Yeah.
I'm not forgetting the name. I have a speech impediment. Sometimes it gets caught up. Is that it felt like at times like the big crises, like Crisis on Multiple Earths, where it was these personal stories, but it was also dealing with the nature of just what DC Comics is. I wanted to ask you about one specific comment.
Sure.
In that double page spread where you talk about, you know, like there was the crisis, you know, like polarity and all that kind of stuff. You have this line where you say that our, meaning DC's world, was set up to absorb and like absolve other things and take them in. Is that a subtle reference to how DC as a company started out, like buying like charlatan characters and bringing in Shazam and like absorbing?
I know what you're saying. I hadn't thought of it that way. It's more, the idea is supposed to be that the way that we've set up the mythology through Justice League and all of this is that the DC universe was started in such a way that it was this kind of weird anomaly, and that's this kind of cosmic goddess that we made up, Perpetua, and she made it something that didn't sort of obey the laws of nature, that the hand and the presence and all these kind of DC cosmic forces adhere to. And so she built it in a way that was abnormal. She's punished for it. She's sort of enclosed in the sword wall. And then when Lex Luthor and the Legion of Doom break that wall, she's free, and now she's kind of reigning. So the idea is more the idea is supposed to be that what I'm getting at with death metal is this: is like the entire story is about about the belief that there's a way of both acknowledging years and years of continuity and dedication, both on the part of fans, retailers, and the characters themselves.
Yeah.
And then also being able to say, and it's time for some risks to be taken going forward that aren't there to just upset you and throw out the baby with the bathwater, but that are additive, like we were saying earlier. They're bringing characters that deserve a bigger chance and all of that stuff. So Wonder Woman, to me, as the main character of the story, and the reason she has like a chainsaw of truth in it, all of that stuff is deliberately chosen. Where
it's my so fucking cool.
Thanks, man. I mean, all of it is kind of deliberate, where the idea is that she's trying to say, nobody wants to look at the truth, but the truth is all of us are on the same side for comics, where, whether you believe that it should be this very conservative sort of Silver Age reboot now, or you think that it should be something that moves past all of the characters and tries brand new characters in all kinds of ways, there's a way of doing all of that at once, whether you're doing some in digital, some in this, some in that. However you try it, the goal is all of it. Like, the goal is all of it.
I just like, as kind of like a weird like student of like, I've always been fascinated by how DC was founded and how Marvel was always I think the only character that Marvel has ever taken from a different company was Black Knight, and DC is at the in their beginning, they like absorbed all these characters. And then also you add that line in where I was thinking about it. I was like, oh, is he also talking about Watchmen? Is he also talking about the absorption of these Charlton characters that have become this other thing that are now so important to this mythology? It really did feel like reading Jeff Johns' Rebirth again, where suddenly... and like Jeff Johns' Rebirth is such a huge inspiration on Ryan and I's run, where we were trying to take 30 years of Venom comics and the same way that Jeff Johns did, like boil them down and be like, hey, here's an explanation for all the continuity errors. Here is an explanation for, they're not necessarily retcons, they're just like explaining things that like pieces of the mythology that you didn't know. Like, you're just uncovering, which is going back to that additive idea that you and I keep on talking.
Yeah, and it's synergistic, where, I mean, the thing that I've learned from Jeff, and it's funny because Jeff and I at times have had, not to be, again, like too inside the beltway, but there were times where when I was coming up, we had not a contentious relationship, but just a distant relationship, where there were things that I was trying to be deferential and support some of the stuff he was doing, but I also didn't understand the politics at DC, and so sometimes I would, make a mistake or all of it. The point I'm trying to make is that now we have become friends over the last few years, and seeing the beauty of what he often was able to do, which is take a classic mythology and the kind of convoluted modern interpretation and marry them in a way that would make sense.
He's so good at that, and so are you. Like, you were.
I learned at his feet with that, and he's like, I just talked to him yesterday actually about stuff with death metal and the idea of being able to say there are always going to be people that you're going to upset. There are always stories you're going to leave on the cutting room floor. There are always things that, like, to this day, I did one arc on Justice League that mentioned that there are 7 or something dimensions, and now I still have people DMing me being like, but wait, but in the old continuity there were 9 dimensions and this and that, and I keep trying to say
I know.
That'll always be there, but what you try and do is you try and figure out what's beautiful about, or what cuts to the core of the character with the kind of the classic mythology. What's the best of the stuff that's been done in a way now that also speaks to that same core definitive kind of DNA of what the character's about, And then if you can synthesize those the way you guys have been able to with Eddie and with Venom, I mean, to me, that's the fun. And then you make something, like you said, that's additive, it's recombinant, it's exciting to people because they see that you love the same stuff they love, even if you take some risks. Because the thing that I'd say is, like, what you're doing with Venom, what we did with Batman, the fun of it is that when you do it in a way that you love, and you're writing about things you care about, a lot of the time I feel like people forget that you're upsetting them. So, like, with Batman, people now are like, oh, Court of Owls, it's, or even like Black Mirror, they're like, oh, it's it's a fun read and it's part of the shelf of certain thing with detective or whatever. But at the time, people were really angry at me when we announced that we were going to give Jim Gordon a psychotic son. They were really pissed off. And the same thing with, like, the possibility of giving Batman a quasi maybe brother, and the fact that he didn't know the Court of Owls exist. All of that stuff was upsetting. The same way I feel like when you do the things you do with Venom and Null and sort of adding to the mythology, all of the stuff that you're bringing, the initial reaction is this kind of knee-jerk, what the fuck are they doing with that? Are they, retconning, like you said, that? Yeah. But what you're really doing is you're taking the pieces that you love, that they love too, and you're making something bigger and hopefully, synergistic, that eventually someone else will add to and make something even bigger than you.
Or also get rid of.
Yeah, sure. Or just
and whoever comes on Venom after Ryan and I are done, if they want to burn it to the ground, that's also fine. I
didn't want to tell you, but Greg and I are actually coming to take Venom.
Are we announcing this now?
We'd be thrilled.
Are we doing this?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, and Ryan and I are. This is when you don your gold chain, and Ryan and I put on our Batman shirts.
Right. I would love to see your Batman 100%. I really would. On that note, I think we should probably start trying to wrap up. I know we all have.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like we can start winding down. We did get a question in the chat that I feel like puts a nice bow on the thing, which is, I lost to the name of who asked it, but they
for a while if you want. I can keep trucking along here if you're up for it.
I mean, whatever you guys feel like. We're approaching.
If it's like a set thing.
Let's start taking some questions from the audience and see.
If I go back to that house and that baby wakes up, I have to take that baby. But if I stay out here and I'm still, people can see it.
Totally.
Because I took the baby for a long time today to get this time, so I'm kind of like.
Okay. All right. Great. Yeah. So
somebody asked whether death metal was the result of the Black Winter eating DC universe in Thor.
That's so funny. I read that.
I love that you referenced the DC stuff with that. And I feel like all of us want to do a DC Marvel crossover. Grant was the one when I did Metal #1 and I pitched Death Metal, and I was talking to him about Metal itself to see if he wanted to do any of it. And he's like, how does it end when you break the source wall? And I was like, well, it just ends with them not knowing what's coming and that stuff. And then I'm going to leave, or if it fails and we can't do death metal, then, we'll have left a bigger universe. And he was like, Scott, you're missing the best ending. Like, what is it? And he was like,
the Marvel universe comes through. Yeah,
the source wall breaks, it falls down, and who's there but the Silver Surfer? And then he was like, and then you take the mic, you drop it and you walk away.
Exactly. I wish to God we could do it, and Scott, you and I should be careful right now. But hopefully some of those things happen. But it was funny. I was doing a signing with Jim Lee at Torpedo Comics in Vegas. And that issue of Thor came out. I think I guess I want to say it's issue 3, where the Black Winter just comes and just takes the entire DCU and just destroys it, and just destroys it with it. Yeah. Just destroys it in like 3 pages and just moves on. And like, no one at Marvel gave me guff over it. Like, no one blinked an eye over it. And then it hit the internet, and it was like it hit the internet right at the same time as Jeff Johns' last issue of the Watchmen thing came out, where he predicted the crossover, and people were like, "Oh my God, this is it!" And I was sitting next to Jim Lee at this signing, and I was like, "Hey, are you mad at me?" And he was like, "About what?" And I was like, "The entire internet is really mad at me because I just killed your entire company." And he was like, "You did what?" And I pulled the PDF up on my phone, and I just showed it to Jim Lee, and Jim goes, "Oh my God, that's fucking hilarious!" Like
Jim doesn't get mad at anybody.
Jim
is like a
is
magical,
phenomenal. You know, Jim is
magical
phenomenal.
person. I remember when I was working on Superman with him and Superman Unchained, and like it was the first issue or so, and we were at San Diego, and there was it was back when Godzilla first came out, and I am like a diehard Godzilla fan from childhood. I grew up in New York City, and every Sunday they had on Channel 11 WPIX Monster Matinee on Sunday, and I would watch these Godzilla movies all the time. And so I remember Jim was like, "I know you like Godzilla. They're having a Godzilla preview. They set up this whole activation where you can go in and it's a museum and da-da-da. Do you want to go?" And I'm like, "Oh, I tried, but it's sold out." And he was like, boop-a-doop-a-doop-boop on his BlackBerry, and he's like, "We have tickets, so you should go." And we were on an interview, and I was like, "Are you sure?" And he's like, "Go ahead. You know, you go ahead of me, and I'll meet you there." And like, you know, whatever. And I'm like, "Okay, God, great." So I left the interview, ran out of the convention center. I could basically see where it was because it was straight down through the gas lamp thing. Ran there, like sweating, you know what I mean? Got there because he was like, "Oh, you know, we only have 15, 20 minutes. Got there, and Jim was already there. And I was like, how did you do that? How did you travel here? And he's like, "What do you mean? I walked." And that's when I realized, I was like, Jim is a magical, like, dimensional being of some kind, and that was it. I was like, I'll never understand the physics of how you beat me to this thing when I could see where I was going, and I ran.
Yeah.
Whatever secret tunnel you went through or whatever, I will always like bow down to Jim Lee's powers. He's amazing.
I have two questions from the chat, and then I think we should probably wrap it up.
Sure.
If that's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
A fan wants to know. Oh God, I've lost their name now. Who came up with the metal surnames in the credits for the book?
Oh, that's the. Oh, like for us, it's actually, we leave that to this one editor who loves doing it. His name's Dave Wilgotts, and he's amazing. He's a big metal fan, and he basically he loves it so much that we just let him make them all up. So he comes back with all of that all the time.
That was Dakota Croz's question.
No, I loved it. I loved it because it reminded me of those old school
Jazzy John Romita.
John the Bruiser Buscema kind of shit,
Yeah.
And
well, that thing is like, if I could say one thing about metal before the last question, is just what we're trying to do. Like with the first one, even the choice to do that narration that's kind of like third person omniscient, which I'd never tried before. That is that kind of like grand, majestic, that lofty. And with this one, I wanted it to be more known. If there's narration, is from Sergeant Rock, who's a rotting zombie. You see him in issue 4, and he's just a skull in a helmet that's being carried along by ambush bug, and that stuff in the war zone. And we eventually catch up to that scene. But the idea really for me is this one, death metal is something. The reason it doesn't have that kind of narration, the reason it's raw, the reason it's meant to be kind of dark but fun, we want it to be about acknowledging, longtime fans and also new fans, and saying, well, what we're going to build on the other side of this is something special that invites you in, that's bright and fun, but also try some and that. So it's, these events are always about trying to present a future vision of the company and saying why why what matters. And the goal with it is to tell a story that really is a thank you. That's the whole thing.
Well, that's
by the way, like,
a more eloquent version of what I was saying earlier when I said that it feels like when you read that book that you're reading issue 5 of a 20-issue arc.
Yeah.
Like you're dropped into this madness and the curiosity and the fear or pure like ferocity of that book between you and Scott and Greg is just fucking phenomenal and so impressive.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about it, and then I'll shut up about it, is just that, also it's the last time we're going to do it, meaning, like, I know I've said before it's our last Batman thing, it's our last thing, but Greg and I, we're so grateful for the kind of the run that everybody's given us, and we still have stuff at DC. We have things we want to do, but this idea of doing like events and doing things that are kind of line wide, and this, I really want to step back from that and focus on creator owned Greg,
right.
All of it.
Well, I know that Greg really wants to work with me, so so
honestly, I would be
maybe we do a key party and you can have Stegman for a little bit and I'll have Capullo for a little bit.
Hey,
I'm glad that I have no agency in this.
Greg as much. If you wanna trade partners for a little bit and do that, Ryan, I'd be honored to work with you on anything, and that would be a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, I would love that too.
Like, eventually you guys get back together, Greg and I get back together. It's all good. We're all fun. It's all fun.
I'm not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. Greg Capullo is not going anywhere. On that note, I want to end on one last question, and then we'll say our good nights because we've almost been going for 2 hours now, which is just Scott. Before I ask this dumb question, I just want to say thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a pleasure, dude. And honestly, like, I don't know what the format is in terms of like bringing guests back, but I have a great time talking to you guys. I'd be more than happy to come on as much as you want. So
I'd
love to come on. We do something where we don't talk about like stuff we're promoting, and we just talk craft, or we just talk, we just talk war stories, or we just talk like books we love growing up, or like pages, things that we own. It's my McFarlane page when I'm 13, like whatever it is. Like,
get out of here.
This kind of thing, like. Again, like there's COVID, you don't get out. I haven't seen anybody, all of it, but also like getting to refocus on the idea of talking to other people that have the same passions and getting to talk freely. I mean, I would love to do this more. So yeah,
that's why Ryan and I started this. Is just because Ryan and I are legitimately best friends, and we just wanted an opportunity to look at each other's faces and talk, and also talk to our audiences, because I know that our fans. We miss our fans as much as our fans miss us being able to be at shows, and hopefully, knock on wood, next year we'll be able to do that. But again, before I ask this dumb question, in fact, actually, I have 2 questions for you. One is a serious one, and one is a classic Stegman and his amazing friends question that I have to ask you, that every guest gets asked. Okay, the first one is someone in the chat said, "When the fuck is American Vampire and Redneck gonna cross over?"
Oh, I mean, I would. Well, the only thing we're doing an arc of American Vampire right now that we're on issue 4 of 10. So they're going to announce it in weeks. Like, they just wanted us to get 4 issues in. It's called American Vampire Bicentennial 1976.
Oh, great.
So as soon as we're done with that, which I would love to do it. So, I mean, I think it would be a blast. I'm totally for it. We've been dying to get this one arc done that would bring it. This basically brings us up to the present. So as soon as this is finished,
I am down whenever you are free. I think I think the characters of the redneck, the Bartletts and the grandpas, meeting Skinner Sweet, in a distant,
we'll have more control over it once we bring it to the present, just contractually as well. So I think it would be a lot to get to do something like that.
All right. Well, let's you and I keep on keeping our eye on that. So the last question, before I give it over to Ethan and Ryan to close our show out, is the question that we asked. It was one of our first episodes we ever did, where we opened it up to the audience, and someone asked the greatest question of all time, and we ask it of every guest, and that question is this: if there were two people on the moon, and one of them killed the other person with a space rock, would that be fucked up?
I mean, it depends who they are. You know what
exactly.
I mean?
Yes, exactly.
What's the story? Like,
because if one of them is Hitler, then no. It's
not.
If
it's one of them's fault that they got stuck there. And the other one is like, if I kill you, I can get home. I mean, there's a story there. That's the whole thing. It's like, that's where you and I come in, and we're like,
Yeah, I mean, also, here's the biggest question that I think Ryan brought up one time, is it changes the entire story. Was it a moon rock, or did they bring that rock?
That's a big deal, yeah.
That changes the story entirely. So like there is no definitive answer, right? But I think it is a Hemingway level question. Is that fucked up? We'll never know, because we don't have.
When we do with the DC Marvel crossover, we'll start it that way.
Let's start it that way.
It'll be like Batman and Spider-Man on the moon with one rock.
Yeah.
And then just staring at each other.
Superman and Doc Manhattan or Thor and Superman are on the moon, and there's a rock.
Exactly.
All right, guys. Since you guys can't see it on the live stream, I'm gonna hold this up to the camera so you guys can see our precious.
Yeah,
Oh, why? I didn't realize you were drawing this whole time, dude.
Yeah, Scott, can you see it? It looks great.
That's gorgeous. You just did that while we were talking?
Yeah, we're gonna put this up. You can pick a charity. We'll donate the money for it, whatever we get for this.
Yeah.
And if you want that charity to be Ethan and Griffin, that's.
So again, just to reiterate, that drawing that Ryan just did is a one of a kind. Ryan has never drawn that character before. It is going to be mailed around the country. I'm going to sign it. Ryan's going to sign it. Greg Capullo is going to sign it. Scott's going to sign it. And then we're going to put it up for auction on Twitter, and we're going to donate all the proceeds to a very worthy charity. We don't know which one yet. We'll
figure it out. What I'd love to do, if it's sort of all of us deciding honestly, is that, with everything going on in the world too, I feel like, we were talking earlier about, I think a couple of people have pointed out to me too, like how lucky we've been in terms of our trajectories and all that, and the fact that not only that, but like I certainly have definitely dared DC to fire me a couple times, where I remember it was like, I think it was Cecil Castellucci that pulled me aside once and was like, a woman would never get away with that kind of yelling at a boss the way you just did, and I think what I've been the last couple of years, like one of the things that the reason I wanted to start the teaching up again, and the fact that doing that is probably the thing I'm proudest of at DC, but maybe we can give it to Creators for Creators or something that encourages emergent voices in comics, because I feel like right now it's much like a crazy time, and shops are closing, and we're all worried about distribution and Diamond and all that. It's also like a really vibrant time when it comes to the comics that are being produced grassroots and out there, and there's so many voices. So if we can do something that kind of brings, that might not have the same resources we do, I think that'd be a good direction.
Yeah, Scott, I think you're right on. I completely agree. We'll have news about that. We'll have private discussions about where
Sure.
the best place that can go. And we'll have news for you guys next week. But this has been wonderful, Scott. Thank you so much for coming on.
No, it's been a blast, man. And honestly, like anytime, I'm happy to come back. And I really appreciate you having me on. And thank you to everybody that's supporting all of us. Like your books, our books, the industry itself. Like right now, I feel like we're all in it together. So any chance we don't get to go to cons to say thank you. So anyone watching, just thank you.
Feel very blessed. Yeah, feel very, 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 very blessed.
Should I take us out?
Yeah, Ethan, you want to take us out, buddy?
Yeah, one thing I'll say to you, Scott, real fast, is that you got a comment from Oscar Osario who said Scott should start a podcast. And just to let you know, the Amazing Friends Network is always open to you, and Griffin and I work for free. So you just give us the word, and you'll, in your inbox, have the first episode of your very own podcast, and you might be in it, too. So,
Sure, why not?
Scott needs more jobs.
Yeah. I honestly like the dad job right now with summer coming and them home and all of that stuff and COVID is I'm probably next week gonna say something about stepping away.
You're so goddamn popular that you could do a podcast about you going out with you just recording your daily walks with your baby.
It's true.
And people would fucking love that.
That's true. But Oscar's not the only one listening. We had a whole lot of people turning up to the chat, so thank you everybody for listening. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much, Scott, for being here. And thanks for listening to yet another episode of Stegman and His Amazing Friends. We have been Ryan, Donny, Scott, and Ethan, and we'll be back next week. Make sure you tweet at us at Stegman Show or email us at stegmanandfriends@gmail.com.
You can find us on iTunes and Spotify, and please subscribe, hit that smash button. Scott Snyder
that smash.
Scott Snyder will personally come to your house and sign autographs of Batman books if you subscribe to our podcast.
That's true.
That's a guarantee.
Yep. Individually, we're at Don Cates on Twitter. Ryan Stegman, you're on Twitter as well, right, Ryan?
Yes, as Ryan Stegman.
As Ryan Stegman. Scott, what are you on Twitter? What's your handle?
S Snyder 1835. That's Elvis's birthday. I'm like a long time since I was a little kid Elvis fan. So it's 1835. So.
Very cool. All right, and I'm at Just to Astonish. Thanks everybody, and we will see you next week.
And by the time this is going to come out, I hope everyone has had a great July 4th and has celebrated the America that should exist. And be safe and be good to each other. Love someone. Be dope. Read comics. Stay safe. This is Donny Cates for Ryan Stegman, Ethan, and Scott Snyder saying we love you, read comics, be dope, and have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. So, Scott, you can...